The big space station called Nexus Prime was full of aliens from every corner of the galaxy. Strange creatures walked, floated, and crawled through the bright hallways. Some had 4 arms, others had no arms at all. Some breathed air, others needed special gas to stay alive. But they were all here for the same reason. The great tournament was about to begin. Admiral Jake Sullivan stood at the big window looking down at the arena. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had seen many battles in his life, but this was different. This time, everything was at stake. Next to him stood Commander Lisa Park. She was younger than Jake, maybe 40 years old, with short black hair and a worried look on her face. She held a computer tablet in her hands and kept checking the numbers on it. "Sir, they want your final answer," Lisa said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could tell she was nervous. Below them, the arena was huge. It could hold 1 million people, and today it was full. Lights flashed everywhere, showing the faces of the fighters who would compete. 12 fighters from 12 different worlds. The winner would get 3-star systems that everyone had been fighting over for years. Jake looked at the biggest screen. It showed a creature that looked like a walking mountain. His name was Krax, the Destroyer, and he came from a world where everyone was big and strong. Krax was 8 feet tall and weighed as much as a small car. His muscles were like steel, and his fists could break through walls. "He has never lost a fight," Lisa said, following Jake's eyes. "He has killed 47 fighters in legal matches. The doctors say his bones are 3 times stronger than ours." On another screen was a fighter that moved so fast he was just a blur. This was Vextar from the planet Zephyr. His people were built for speed. They could move faster than the human eye could see. Vextar had trained for 3 years just to get even faster. "Their reflexes are incredible," Lisa continued. "They can dodge laser beams. Their nervous system works 10 times faster than a human's." There were other fighters too. One was a creature made of living crystal who could bend light around herself. Another was from a race that could read minds and crush them with just a thought. Each fighter was the best from their world, trained for years to be perfect killers. Then, Jake's eyes found the human fighter. Maya Rodriguez sat on a simple mat in the corner of the human area. She was 28 years old, average height, with brown hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked like she could be anyone's sister or daughter. Next to the alien monsters, she looked tiny and weak. She was sitting with her eyes closed, breathing slowly. She looked peaceful, like she was taking a nap instead of getting ready for the biggest fight in galactic history. "Sir," Lisa said carefully, "are you sure about this choice? Captain Danny Wright is bigger and stronger. He won the boxing championship 3 years running. Sergeant Kelly Adams scored higher on every test we gave her. Even Corporal Ben Turner has more combat experience." Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "That's exactly why Maya is the right choice." Lisa looked confused. "I don't understand, sir." "Look at them," Jake said, pointing at the alien fighters on the screens. "What do you see?" Lisa looked. "I see the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy. Each one could probably kill 100 normal soldiers." "That's right. And what are they all doing?" Lisa watched the screens. Krax was lifting weights that would crush a normal person. Vextar was moving through an obstacle course so fast the cameras could barely follow him. The mind reader was making practice dummies explode just by looking at them. "They're showing off," Lisa said slowly. "Exactly. They're showing everyone how strong they are, how fast they are, how dangerous they are. They want everyone to be afraid of them." Jake pointed to Maya, who was still sitting quietly. "Now look at our fighter. What is she doing?" "Nothing," Lisa said. "She's just sitting there." "Right. She's not trying to scare anyone. She's not trying to prove how tough she is. She's thinking." The announcer's voice boomed across the arena in a language that sounded like music mixed with thunder. The translation came through their earpieces. "People of the galaxy, see your champions. The tournament begins in 7 days." May the strongest win. The crowd went crazy. A million voices cheered and screamed. Lights flashed and music played. It was the biggest party the galaxy had ever seen. But Jake noticed something interesting. All the cameras were pointed at the scary fighters. All the reporters were interviewing the ones who looked dangerous. The betting screen showed cracks at the top, then Vextar, then the mind-reader. Maya was listed at the bottom. The odds against her were 500 to 1. Most people thought she would lose in the first few seconds. "Sir," Lisa said, "the other species are laughing at us. They think we're crazy for sending her." Jake watched as an alien reporter, a creature that looked like a walking tree, interviewed some fans in the stands. The translation came through. "The humans must be joking. That little creature couldn't hurt a child from our world. This will be over before it starts." Other aliens were saying similar things. "Humans are so weak. They have no claws, no armor, no special powers. It's almost sad to watch." But Jake wasn't upset by this. In fact, he looked pleased. "Let them laugh," he said. "Let them think we're weak and stupid. Let them ignore Maya completely. But sir, what if they're right? What if she really can't win?" Jake was quiet for a moment. He remembered the first time he had seen Maya fight. It was during a training exercise 2 years ago. She had been up against 5 other soldiers, all bigger and stronger than her. Everyone expected her to lose quickly. Instead, she had beaten all 5 of them in less than 3 minutes. She didn't use strength or speed. She used her brain. She knew exactly where to hit, exactly when to move, exactly how to make her enemies defeat themselves. After the fight, Jake had asked her how she did it. "Simple," she had said. "I watched them fight other people first. I learned their patterns, their habits, their weaknesses. Then I made a plan. Everyone has weaknesses, sir. You just have to know where to look." Now looking down at Maya in the arena, Jake saw her open her eyes. She looked up at the screen showing the alien fighters. She watched each one carefully, studying their movements, learning their secrets. "She's not just sitting there," Jake said to Lisa. "She's hunting." The alien fighters were still showing off, still trying to scare their opponents. They were so busy looking powerful that they didn't notice the small human woman who was watching them with the eyes of a predator. In 7 days, the tournament would begin. The aliens expected an easy victory over the weak humans. They had trained for years to become perfect fighting machines, but they had made one mistake. They had forgotten that humans were not just another species to be defeated. Humans were survivors. They had climbed to the top of the food chain on their own world, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were the smartest. And Maya Rodriguez was about to remind the galaxy why you should never underestimate a human who has had time to think. The countdown had begun. 7 days until the tournament. 7 days until the galaxy learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming. 3 years before the tournament began, every species in the galaxy started preparing their champions. They knew this would be the most important fight in their history. The winning species would control 3 rich star systems with valuable planets and trade routes. On the frozen world of Gorlak Prime, Krax the Destroyer trained harder than any warrior in his species' history. The planet was covered in ice and snow, with mountains that reached into the clouds. It was a world that made its people strong just to survive. Krax stood in the center of a training ground, carved from solid rock. Around him, his trainers watched. With serious faces, these were not ordinary teachers. They were the greatest fighters from 1,000 years of Gorlak history. "Your strength must be perfect," said Groth, his main trainer. Groth was old now, with scars covering his massive body from countless battles. "The humans are clever creatures. They will try to trick you. But tricks mean nothing when you can crush them with one blow." Krax nodded and turned to face a practice. Dummy made of the strongest metal his people knew how to make. It was designed to be harder than the armor worn by the toughest warriors. With a roar that shook the mountains around them, Crack struck the dummy with his fist. The metal exploded into pieces. The sound was like thunder, and the ground shook under their feet. The other Gorlak warriors cheered and beat their chests in approval, but Groth was not satisfied. Again, he commanded. You must be able to do this 100 times without getting tired. The human might try to make you waste your energy. Crax trained every day from sunrise to sunset. He lifted stones that weighed as much as small buildings. He ran up mountainsides carrying other warriors on his back. He practiced his fighting moves until he could break through solid rock walls with any part of his body. After 3 years of this training, Crax had become something beyond what his people thought was possible. His punches could shatter steel. His skin was so tough that normal weapons could not cut him. His muscles were like iron cables, and his bones were stronger than the frame of a spaceship. Meanwhile, on the crystal world of Zephyr, Vextar was training in a completely different way. His planet was covered in tall spires made of living crystal that grew toward the sky. The Zephyrian people lived in these towers, moving between them at speeds that would make other species dizzy. Vextar's training ground was a maze of crystal platforms connected by narrow bridges. Energy weapons fired at him from hidden spots, shooting beams of light that would burn through normal flesh in seconds. But Vextar was not normal, even for his species. He moved like liquid lightning, dodging between the energy beams so fast that they seemed to be moving in slow motion. His feet barely touched the crystal surfaces as he jumped from platform to platform. Sometimes he would be hit by 3 or 4 beams at the same time and still manage to avoid them all. Faster, called his trainer, a creature so quick that most people could never see her clearly. The human will try to confuse you with unexpected moves. You must be ready to react before she even thinks of what to do. Vextar pushed himself harder. He practiced catching arrows shot from dozens of directions at once. He learned to fight while blindfolded, using only his hearing and the feel of air movement to know where his enemies were. He trained his reflexes until he could catch raindrops falling from the sky. His species had always been fast, but Vextar became something like a force of nature. He could move so quickly that he seemed to be in several places at the same time. His strikes came faster than thought, and his dodges were impossible to predict. In the space between dimensions, where reality was thin and thoughts could become real, the ethereal champion trained her mind to become a weapon. Her people did not have physical bodies the way other species did. They were beings of pure mental energy, able to affect the world around them just by thinking about it. The ethereal champion's name could not be spoken by creatures with mouths, so others called her the Mind Walker. She practiced in a place that existed only in thought, where she could create enemies out of her imagination and fight them with the power of her will. In this mental space, she battled armies of warriors from every species she might face. She learned to break their minds, to stop their hearts with a thought, to make them forget how to breathe. Her psychic abilities grew stronger every day until she could crush the thoughts of lesser beings like stepping on insects. The human will. Try to resist your mental attacks, warned her teacher, a being so old that its thoughts had shaped entire worlds. Her species has some small ability to block psychic intrusion. You must be prepared to destroy her mind completely in the first moment of contact. The Mind Walker practiced this technique until she could erase the consciousness of imaginary humans in fractions of a second. She learned to attack not just thoughts, but the basic functions that kept a body alive. She became death itself, wrapped in the form of living thought. Each alien species trained their champion according to their greatest strengths. The crystal beings learned to bend light and create illusions that could drive enemies insane. The rock people, who lived deep underground, practiced techniques that could cause earthquakes with their bare hands. The fire creatures learned to raise their body temperature until they could melt metal just by touching it. Every champion became the perfect example of what their species could achieve. They were legends in the making, creatures of such power that songs would be sung about them for thousands of years. And on Earth, Maya Rodriguez did push-ups in a basic military gym. The alien observers who came to watch her train were first confused, then amused, then openly insulting in their reports back to their home worlds. The human performs simple exercises that our children learn in their first year of life, reported the Zephyrian observer. She runs at speeds that would be considered slow walking for our people. She lifts weights that our weakest citizens could move with one finger. Most strange of all, added the Gorlak observer, she spends most of her time watching recordings of other fighters instead of building her own strength. It is as if she believes she can win by studying instead of training. What the aliens did not understand was that Maya's real training was happening inside her head. Every night, she watched videos of fights from every species that would be in the tournament. But she was not trying to copy what they did. She was looking for something else entirely. You see this? She said to her training partner, Sergeant Tony Clark, as they watched a recording of cracks breaking through a stone wall. He pulls his right shoulder back before every big punch. It's just for a fraction of a second, but it's always there. Tony, who had fought in wars on 3 different planets, nodded slowly. And the fast one from Zephyr? Maya switched to a video of Vextar moving through his training course. He always dodges to his left when facing multiple opponents. It's instinct for his species because that's how their bodies are built. They can turn left faster than right. She showed him recordings of every champion, pointing out small details that no one else had noticed. The Mind Walker always closed her eyes for just a moment before using her psychic powers. The crystal being's light tricks always started from the same hand. Every fighter had patterns, habits, weaknesses that they did not even know about themselves. While the other champions were becoming perfect examples of their species' strengths, Maya was becoming something much more dangerous. She was becoming a human who understood exactly how to beat enemies that were faster, stronger, and more powerful than herself. The thing is, she explained to Tony as they practiced basic combat moves, they're all training to fight like they're people have always fought. They're becoming better at being what they already are. And you're not? Maya smiled, and Tony felt a small chill run down his spine. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had found the perfect hunting ground. I'm training to be something they've never seen before, she said. I'm training to be unpredictable. The aliens thought humans were weak because they did not have natural weapons like claws or armor like shells. They thought humans were slow because they could not run as fast as a Zephyrian. They thought humans were stupid because they could not read minds like an ethereal. But they were wrong about what made humans dangerous. Humans were dangerous because they could adapt, they could learn. They could look at a problem and find a solution that no one else had ever thought of. Maya Rodriguez was about to show the galaxy what that really meant. 6 months before the tournament, the galactic media began their coverage of the upcoming event. News stations across 1,000 worlds sent their best reporters to interview the champions and show their incredible abilities. The coverage was watched by billions of beings throughout the galaxy. On Nexus Prime, the biggest sports network in known space, set up their studios. The main show was hosted by Zixto, a creature that looked like living water held together by invisible force. He was famous throughout the galaxy for his entertaining commentary and his ability to make even the most boring fights seem exciting. Welcome, beings of all worlds, to our special coverage of the great tournament, Zixtal announced, his transparent form rippling with colors that showed his excitement. Over the next few months, we will bring you exclusive interviews and training footage from all 12 champions. The first segment featured Krax the Destroyer. The cameras followed him to his training ground on Gorlak Prime, where he was practicing against 5 opponents at once. The footage showed him picking up one warrior and throwing him 50 feet through the air, Another warrior tried to attack from behind, but Krax caught his weapon with one hand and crushed it to powder. "Magnificent," Zixtel commented as the audience watched Krax demolish a practice building with his bare hands. Krax has increased his strength by 30% since beginning his tournament training. Medical experts say his bone density is now comparable to starship hull plating. The crowd in the studio, made up of representatives from many species, cheered and applauded. The betting odds showed Krax as the clear favorite to win the entire tournament. Next came footage of Vexstar training on his crystal world. The cameras could barely keep up with his movements as he raced through obstacle courses at impossible speeds. In one demonstration, he dodged 100 laser beams fired at him simultaneously while running across a field of razor-sharp crystal spikes. "Simply incredible," Zixtel said, his voice filled with amazement. "Vexstar has broken every speed record known to his species. Our motion sensors indicate he can now move faster than most spacecraft can travel in atmosphere." The show continued with profiles of each champion. The Mindwalker demonstrated her psychic abilities by making a mountain of metal collapse into dust just by looking at it. The crystal being created illusions so real that the camera crew became lost in them and had to be rescued. Each demonstration was more impressive than the last. Then came the segment on Maya Rodriguez. The footage showed her in a plain Earth military gymnasium, doing simple exercises that looked boring compared to the alien displays of power. She was jumping rope, doing sit-ups, and practicing basic punching techniques against a canvas bag filled with sand. The studio audience began to laugh. Some of the alien reporters started making jokes in their own languages. The universal translators picked up comments like, "Is this supposed to be training? And my offspring could do better than this." Zixtel tried to be polite, but even he seemed amused. And here we see the human champion, Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, performing what humans call calisthenics. While perhaps not as visually impressive as the other champions, I'm sure she has her own unique approach to preparation. The laughter in the studio grew louder when the footage showed Maya sitting at a desk, watching videos on a computer screen. She was taking notes with an old-fashioned pen and paper, occasionally pausing the video to write something down. "It appears the human believes she can win through study rather than strength," commented Dr. Velanara, a Zephyrian sports expert who was a guest on the show. "While education is admirable, one cannot think their way through having their bones crushed by a Gorlak warrior." The other experts nodded in agreement. "Humans have been members of the galactic community for only 50 years, said Professor Morth, a crystalline academic. "They have no great military victories, no legendary warriors, no combat traditions that date back more than a few centuries. They are essentially children attempting to compete with adults." The show dedicated exactly 3 minutes to Maya's segment before moving on to more interesting champions. Those 3 minutes were filled with commentary about how unfortunate it was that Earth had no better candidates to send. Meanwhile, on worlds throughout the galaxy, betting houses were taking wagers on the tournament outcome. The odds against Maya winning had grown to 750 to 1. Some bookmakers refused to take bets on her at all, saying it would be like stealing money from their customers. "No one has ever seen a human fighter who could challenge even a basic warrior from the major species," explained Grexon, the owner of the largest betting operation in the Outer Rim. "Their physical capabilities are simply too limited." Maya Rodriguez seems like a pleasant individual, but placing money on her victory would be an act of charity, not gambling. Sports talk shows across the galaxy featured similar discussions. Experts analyzed the fighting styles of the real contenders while barely mentioning the human representative. When Maya was discussed at all, it was usually with a tone of pity or amusement. On the Crystal World News Network, a panel of former champions discussed the upcoming tournament. "The human will likely be eliminated in the first round," said Kexvar, a retired Zephyrian fighter. Her opponent should end the match quickly to avoid unnecessary suffering. I agree, added Throkinol, a legendary Gorlak warrior. Sometimes, mercy is the kindest approach. A swift defeat will allow the human to return home with her dignity intact. Even on Earth, some humans were beginning to doubt their choice. News programs showed interviews with retired military officers who questioned whether Maya was the right representative for their species. Don't get me wrong, Rodriguez is a fine soldier, said General Pete Harrison during a news interview. But we're talking about opponents who could tear apart a tank with their bare hands. Maybe we should have sent someone with more obvious physical advantages. Other Earth military experts agreed. Captain Danny Wright has the size advantage, said Colonel Amy Foster. Sergeant Kelly Adams has better test scores across the board. I'm not sure what the selection committee was thinking. But Admiral Jake Sullivan stood by his choice. In a rare public interview, he defended Maya's selection. I understand the concerns, Sullivan said, sitting in his office with Earth visible through the window behind him. Maya doesn't look impressive. By galactic standards, she can't break through walls or move faster than light, but that's exactly why she's going to win. The interviewer, a young human reporter named Steve Wilson, looked confused. Can you explain what you mean, Admiral? Sullivan smiled the same cold smile he had shown Commander Lisa Park months earlier. Every other species is sending their strongest, fastest, or most powerful warrior. They're all competing to see who can be the most impressive version of what their people have always been, and Maya isn't. Maya is something none of them have ever seen before. She's a human who has had 3 years to study every single opponent she might face. She knows their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighting patterns, and their psychological profiles better than they know themselves. Steve still looked uncertain. But Admiral, can knowledge really overcome such huge physical disadvantages? Sullivan leaned back in his chair. Son, humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth because we were the strongest or fastest creatures on the planet. We did it because we were smart enough to find ways to kill things that should have been able to kill us easily. The interview aired on Earth but was largely ignored by the galactic media. Most alien news networks didn't even mention Sullivan's comments. They were too busy covering the real stories, like Krax breaking a new strength record or Vexstar achieving an impossible new speed milestone. 2 weeks before the tournament, Maya gave her first and only major interview. The reporter assigned to her was clearly a junior member of the Altarian Broadcasting Network, probably given the assignment as punishment for some mistake. The young Altarian, whose name was difficult for humans to pronounce, seemed bored throughout the entire interview. His questions were basic and showed he had done little research about human fighting capabilities. So Lieutenant Rodriguez, he said in a tone that barely hid his lack of interest, what is your strategy against opponents who could literally tear you apart with their bare hands? Maya looked directly into the camera. Her expression was calm and confident, without any trace of fear or doubt. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. Win, she said simply. The interviewer waited for her to say more, but Maya just sat there with that same calm expression. After an awkward silence, he moved on to the next question. Do you have any concerns about the physical differences between yourself and the other champions? No, Maya replied. Another pause. Another awkward silence. Is there anything you would like to say to your supporters back on Earth? Maya smiled for the first time during the interview. It was a small smile, but there was something in it that made the interviewer shift uncomfortably in his seat. Just that they should watch carefully, she said. They're going to see something interesting. The interview lasted only 5 minutes and aired once during off-peak viewing hours. Most of the galaxy missed it completely. Those who did see it generally found it boring and unmemorable. The day of the tournament finally arrived. Nexus Prime had never seen anything like it. Beings from every corner of the galaxy packed the massive arena. The air itself seemed to buzz with excitement and energy from a million different life forms, all gathered in one place. The opening ceremony was a spectacle that would be remembered for centuries. Each champion entered the arena one by one, and the crowd's reaction grew louder with each appearance. First came Krax the Destroyer, the massive Garlek warrior strode into the arena like a walking mountain. With each step, the ground seemed to shake. He raised his arms above his head, and his supporters roared their approval. The sound was like thunder rolling across the arena floor. To demonstrate his power, Krax picked up a steel beam that had been placed near the entrance and bent it into a pretzel with his bare hands. The crowd went wild. Betting screens around the arena showed his odds improving even more. Many spectators were now convinced that no one could possibly stand against such raw strength. Next was Vexstar from the Crystal World. He didn't walk into the arena so much as appear there. One moment the entrance was empty, the next moment he was standing in the center of the fighting area. He moved so fast that most of the audience never saw him enter. To show off his speed, he ran around the entire arena 3 times in less than 2 seconds, leaving a trail of light behind him. The Zephyrian supporters cheered in voices so high-pitched that many other species couldn't hear them. The betting odds shifted again as people remembered that sometimes speed could beat strength. The Mindwalker entered without any fanfare. She simply materialized in the arena as if stepping through an invisible door. She looked like a tall, thin humanoid made of shifting shadows and starlight. To demonstrate her power, she looked at a practice dummy made of reinforced metal and plastic. The dummy simply stopped existing. It didn't explode or crumble. One moment it was there, the next moment there was empty space where it had been. The arena fell silent for a moment. Even the other champions looked uncomfortable. Here was power that went beyond the physical world entirely. Each champion displayed abilities that seemed to break the laws of nature. The crystal being created 1,000 copies of herself, all moving independently. The rock creature caused a small earthquake just by stamping his foot. The fire warrior raised the temperature around himself until the air itself began to glow. Finally, it was Maya's turn to enter. She walked into the arena normally, like a person going to work. She wasn't trying to look scary or impressive. She didn't demonstrate any special powers or break anything to show her strength. She just walked to her designated spot and stood there calmly. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some people applauded politely because they felt sorry for her. Others laughed because she looked so ordinary compared to the incredible beings who had entered before her. Many simply ignored her and continued talking about the real champions. Maya looked around the arena slowly, her eyes taking in every detail. She saw the other champions, each one radiating confidence and power. She saw the crowd, most of whom were looking past her to focus on more interesting fighters. She saw the betting screens that showed her chances as almost zero. None of this seemed to bother her. If anything, she looked pleased. The tournament format was announced to the crowd. It would be single elimination, with matches continuing until one fighter could no longer continue, either through knockout, submission, or death. Medical teams were standing by, though most people expected they would mainly be cleaning up human remains. The first day featured 6 matches, with each champion facing a preliminary opponent to warm up for the real competition. These opening fights were meant to be easy victories that would get the crowd excited for the later rounds. Krax's first opponent was a warrior from the Reptilian Consortium, a species known for their tough scales and fighting skill. The reptilian fighter, whose name was Slickstar, had won championships on a dozen worlds. He was 8 feet tall, covered in armor-like scales, and carried weapons that could cut through steel. The match lasted exactly 97 seconds. Krax didn't even try to be clever or strategic. He simply walked forward while Slickstar hit him with everything he had. The reptilian's weapons bounced off Krax's skin without leaving a mark. His best fighting techniques, perfected over decades of training, had no effect at all. When Krax got close enough, he grabbed Slickstar around the waist and squeezed. The sound of breaking bones could be heard throughout the arena. Slickstar submitted immediately, and medical teams rushed in to treat his injuries. The crowd loved it. Here was strength so overwhelming that skill and experience meant nothing against it. Vextar's match was even shorter. His opponent was a skilled fighter from the Hunter caste, beings who were bred for combat and had reflexes far superior to most species. The Hunter moved like liquid mercury, striking from multiple angles with weapons that left trails of energy in the air. Vextar let him attack for 30 seconds, dodging every strike so easily that he seemed to be dancing instead of fighting. Then, in a movement too fast for most eyes to follow, he struck the Hunter 17 times in various nerve centers and pressure points. The Hunter collapsed instantly, paralyzed but unhurt. The match had lasted 43 seconds. The Mindwalker's demonstration was the most disturbing of all. Her opponent was a proud warrior from the insectoid hive, a creature with multiple arms and natural weapons that could pierce armor plating. The insectoid was known for his mental discipline and resistance to psychic attack. The Mind Walker simply looked at him. The insectoid stopped moving. His weapons fell from his hands. His eyes became empty and unfocused. After a few seconds, he fell to the ground unconscious. Medical scans later showed that his mind had been completely shut down, though he would recover with no permanent damage. The match had lasted 11 seconds. Each victory was more impressive than the last. The crowd was getting more and more excited as they realized they were watching the most powerful fighters in galactic history. The betting odds kept shifting as people tried to figure out which incredible champion would ultimately win. Finally, it was Maya's turn to fight. Her opponent was Thrakorn, a champion from the Savage Worlds. The Savage Worlds were planets where only the strongest survived, and their people were known throughout the galaxy for their brutal fighting style and complete lack of mercy. Thrakorn was 7 feet tall with natural claws that could cut through metal and armor, plating that had grown from his own bones. He had never lost a fight. He had never shown mercy to a defeated opponent. He was exactly the kind of enemy that made other species nervous about dealing with the Savage Worlds. As the two fighters entered the arena, the size difference was almost comical. Thrakorn looked like he could step on Maya and not even notice. His claws gleamed in the arena lights, and his armor showed scars from 100 battles. Maya looked like someone's younger sister, who had wandered into the wrong place by mistake. The crowd's reaction was predictable. Most people felt embarrassed. For humanity, some laughed at the obvious mismatch. Others placed last-minute bets on how quickly Thrakorn would finish the fight. In the human viewing section, Admiral Jake Sullivan sat with his senior staff. They were the only people in the entire arena who looked confident about Maya's chances. The preliminary reports show that Thrakorn relies heavily on intimidation and overwhelming physical assault, said Commander Lisa Park, reading from her tablet. His fighting style is basically to scare his opponents into making mistakes, then use his superior strength and natural weapons to finish them quickly. Sullivan nodded. And what did Maya's analysis conclude about his weaknesses? Lisa smiled. That he's never fought anyone who wasn't afraid of him. His entire fighting style depends on his opponents being scared and making bad decisions. In the arena, the two fighters took their positions. Thrakorn glared down at Maya with contempt. In his eyes, he had studied basic information about humans and knew they were weak creatures with no natural weapons or armor. This would be over in seconds. This is unfortunate, he growled in his species' harsh language, the translation coming through the arena speakers. I had hoped for a real challenge today. Maya said nothing. She simply took her fighting stance and waited. The referee, a neutral party from a species known for their fairness, raised his hand to signal the start of the match. The crowd fell silent, waiting for the inevitable. Thrakorn crouched slightly, preparing to charge forward and end the fight with one devastating attack. His muscles tensed, his claws extended, and his armor plates shifted to protect his vital areas. Maya watched him carefully, noting every detail of his preparation. She saw how he distributed his weight, how he positioned his arms, how he angled his body for maximum impact. She had studied hundreds of hours of footage, showing Thrakorn and fighters like him. She knew exactly what he was going to do, exactly how he was going to do it, and exactly when he would be most vulnerable. The referee's hand dropped, and the match began. Thrakorn roared and charged forward just as Maya had predicted he would. His attack was perfectly executed according to his species' fighting traditions. It was an assault that had defeated every opponent he had ever faced. But Maya Rodriguez was not like any opponent Thrakorn had ever faced. Thrakorn charged forward with a roar that shook the arena walls. His massive claws were extended, ready to tear through the small human who dared to stand against him. He had used this same attack to defeat hundreds of opponents over the years. It had never failed him, but as he rushed toward Maya, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to run away or dodge to the side, Maya stepped forward to meet his charge. This was not what Thrakorn had expected. Every opponent he had ever fought had tried to avoid his attacks, not meet them head-on. For just a moment, confusion flickered across his face. That moment was all Maya needed. As Thrakorn's clawed hand swept down toward her, Maya moved with precision that came from 3 years of studying exactly this type of attack. She stepped slightly to her left, grabbed Thrakorn's wrist with both hands, and used his own forward momentum against him. The technique she used was thousands of years old on Earth. Human warriors had been throwing larger opponents using leverage and timing since before humans had even learned to write. It was simple physics applied to combat, something any first-year military student could learn. But to the galaxy watching, it looked like magic. Thrakorn, all 7 feet and 300 pounds of him, flew through the air and crashed into the arena wall with a sound like a building falling down. The impact was so hard that cracks appeared in the reinforced metal walls. The arena fell completely silent. 1,000,000 beings from across the galaxy stared in shock at what they had just witnessed. The mighty Thrakorn, champion of the savage worlds, was lying in a heap of twisted metal and debris. But Maya wasn't finished. Before Thrakorn could recover from his surprise, Maya was already moving. She had studied his species' anatomy during her 3 years of preparation. She knew exactly where their nerve clusters were located, which joints were most vulnerable, and how their natural armor could be bypassed, while Thrakorn was still trying. To figure out how he had ended up against the wall, Maya struck 3 precise points along his spine. The strikes looked gentle, almost like she was just tapping him, but each one hit a specific nerve center that controlled different parts of his body. Thrakorn tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't respond. He tried to swing his claws at Maya, but his arms had gone numb. He tried to roar in anger, but even his voice was failing him. "What have you done to me?" he gasped, his words barely audible through the arena's sound system. Maya stepped back and looked down at him calmly. "I studied your species' nervous system," she said simply. "Those pressure points will wear off in about an hour. You'll be fine." Thrakorn struggled to move, but his body refused to obey his commands. After a few seconds of helpless thrashing, he realized he had no choice. "I yield," he said quietly. The referee, who had been too shocked to react until now, raised his hand to signal the end of the match. Winner, Maya Rodriguez of Earth. The timekeeper announced the official duration, 23 seconds. For a long moment, the arena remained silent. Then, slowly, a murmur began to build. People started talking to each other in confused voices. What had they just seen? How had the weakest fighter defeated one of the strongest? In the human section, Admiral Jake Sullivan allowed himself a small smile. "And that," he said to Commander Lisa Park, "is why we chose Maya." But the real shock was just beginning. As news of Maya's victory spread throughout the arena and across the galaxy, people started to realize that everything they thought they knew about humans might be wrong. The galactic media went into overdrive. Reporters who had ignored Maya for months suddenly wanted to interview her. Sports experts who had dismissed her as a joke were now trying to analyze what had happened. Betting odds that had listed her at nearly impossible began to shift dramatically. But Maya herself seemed completely unbothered by all the attention. She walked out of the arena the same way she had walked in, calm and focused. She gave no interviews, made no victory speeches, and showed no sign that she thought she had done anything unusual. The other champions, however, were beginning to look worried. Krax the Destroyer was in his preparation room, watching recordings of Maya's fight over and over again. His trainers were arguing among themselves about what they had witnessed. "She used his strength against him," said Groth, the old warrior who had trained Krax for 3 years. "But how? The technique looked simple, but it should not have worked against someone of Thrakorn S's and power." Krax said nothing. He was studying the footage frame by frame, trying to understand exactly what Maya had done. The more he watched, the more concerned he became. In his crystal tower, Vextar was also reviewing the fight. His trainers were equally confused. "The human moved with good timing, but nothing extraordinary," said his chief instructor. "Our sensors show that her physical speed was well within normal ranges for her species. Yet somehow she was in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment." Vextar nodded slowly. "She knew what he was going to do before he did it," he said quietly. "That was not luck or instinct. That was preparation." The Mind Walker was perhaps the most disturbed of all the remaining champions. In her realm between dimensions, she tried to probe Maya's mind from a distance to understand her capabilities, but something strange happened. Every time she tried to read Maya's thoughts, she found herself looking at something unexpected. Instead of fear or doubt, or even confidence, Maya's mind seemed to contain detailed files of information about every fighter in the tournament. The Mind Walker realized with growing alarm that Maya had spent 3 years learning everything there was to know about psychic combat techniques. She knew how mind attacks worked, how to recognize them, and most importantly, how to defend against them. "This human is not what she appears to be," the Mind Walker whispered to her teachers in the space between thoughts. "She has prepared for US specifically." Over the next few days, as the tournament continued, Maya's victories became increasingly impressive. In the quarterfinals, she faced a crystal being who could create dozens of perfect copies of himself. Maya studied the copies for exactly 15 seconds, then walked directly to one specific copy and struck it once in what looked like empty air. All the copies disappeared instantly. The real crystal being, who had been hiding in a state of invisible refraction, became solid again and fell unconscious. The match lasted 31 seconds. In the semifinals, Maya fought against Vextar himself. The Zephyrian champion tried to use his incredible speed to overwhelm her with attacks from every direction at once, but Maya didn't try to match his speed. Instead, she did something that confused everyone watching. She closed her eyes and stood perfectly still. Vextar attacked her 17 times in 3 seconds. His strikes coming from angles that should have been impossible to predict or defend against. Every single attack missed. Maya had memorized the sound patterns that Vextar's movements made in the air. She had learned to track his position by the tiny changes in air pressure that his superspeed created. She had trained herself to predict his attack patterns based on the rhythm of his footsteps. When Vextar finally paused for a fraction of a second to reassess his strategy, Maya opened her eyes and struck once. Her fist connected with a nerve cluster just behind Vextar's ear. a spot that she had identified as a universal weak point for his species. Vexstar collapsed instantly. The match had lasted 27 seconds. Now only Maya and Krax remained. Final match was scheduled for the next day, and the entire galaxy was talking about nothing else. How had a human, the supposedly weakest species in the Federation, made it to the championship round of the most important tournament in galactic history? The betting odds had shifted completely. Maya was now favored to win, and millions of beings who had laughed at her a week ago were now placing money on her victory. But in the quiet of her preparation room, Maya was not thinking about fame or glory or the shock she had caused throughout the galaxy. She was studying her final notes on Krax the Destroyer, planning exactly how she would defeat the most powerful warrior who had ever lived. She had one more fight to win, and she intended to win it in under 30 seconds. The galaxy was about to learn the final lesson about what it meant to underestimate a human who had had time to prepare. Admiral Sullivan sat in his quarters, looking out at the stars and thinking about what Maya's victory would mean for humanity's place in the galaxy. Other species would no longer see humans as weak newcomers who could be ignored or dismissed. They would see humans as they really were, the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their strength or speed or special powers, but because of their ability to find a way to win against any opponent, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. Maya Rodriguez had reminded the universe of a simple truth: never underestimate someone who fights not with strength, but with intelligence. Tomorrow she would prove that lesson one final time.